So today we'll be building a color picker component in React. What this component consists of is a input field where I can add a hex value for a color. It also has a indicator that matches the hex value that's been entered in the input field, and clicking on this indicator opens up a color picker which allows me to select a color from a swatch. And as I select colors in this swatch, the color value in my input field also changes. So let's get started. So our color picker component is going to have three main parts to it. The first one is it should allow us to enter a hex value. The second is for us to show a small indicator whose background color is going to match the hex value that we entered. And the third is that every time we click on this indicator, we want a color picker or a color swatch to open. So we have our bare bones component here. So let's actually tackle the first point, which is to let us add a hex value. So this means that we basically have to have an input field. So let's return the span, and inside the span is an input field whose type is equal to text, whose value for now is going to be hard coded to white. And let's just see if this renders. We have our input field. So now let's wire the value that we're entering here to our app. So we can come back to our app. Let's set up some state. Update state is equal to react.useState, and its value is going to be white. Let's also create a handle input method which is going to take an event and update the state with the event.target.value. And let's pass this as the onChange handler to our color picker. And let's also pass the value that we want in our color picker as well. So now that we've passed in these two props, let's funnel them into our input field. So we are going to get a value. We'll also get an onChange. And since it's just good practice, let's also allow the user to pass any other props that the user wants to pass to the input field, and let's spread those values as well. And let's take value and pass it here into the value prop of the input field. And the onChange of the input field is also mapped to the onChange prop passed to the color picker. So on saving this, we can see that nothing has changed, but now I can enter new values, and these values are now being passed in to my app through the onChange handler. So now that we have our input field that allows us to add hex values, let's just add some basic styling to this because this doesn't look all that neat. So for styling, we'll be using styled components. So let's pull in styled from styled components. Let's create a container which is going to replace the span that we have here. So style.span, and let's add some basic styling. So we've added some bare bones styling to this span element to give it a little bit more space and to also change the background color and the border color. So what we're saying is that this span needs to be limited to a width of 150 pixels just to make sure it's in a confined space. We've added some padding to give it more space around the input element. We've also added a border, and we've overridden the border color and radius. And we've also undone most of the styling for the input field itself by removing the border and limiting the width, and also like slightly bumping up the font size for it. Now that we've tackled point number 1, let's also handle points 2 and 3. So there are multiple ways in which we can solve the indicator and the color picker dropdown, but browsers do support this inherently through an input type color HTML element. So what this allows you to do is it renders an indicator, and when you click on this indicator, it automatically renders this drop down for you. And all of this is handled as a HTML element provided by the browser itself. So let's use this, but clearly we need to override the styling for the indicator a little bit. So let's tackle point number 2 first. So let's create a input type color whose value is going to be the value that's been entered in the input field. And let's just render this as this and see how it looks. So we have our input type color that's in line with our hex value here. And now if I change this to maybe a red, we can see that the indicator changes as well. So let's actually go and style this indicator to make it look a little bit more cleaner. So to style this, let's select any input whose type is color. So let's get rid of the border first. And if you can notice, there's a slight background behind this indicator. So let's get rid of that background as well. Let's also reset the default height and the default width provided by the browser. And now we have two specific pseudo selectors that we can modify to make the swatch look a little bit better. So the first one is WebKit color swatch wrapper. So this is the wrapper around the swatch itself. So I can give this a height of 14 pixels because we know that the font size is 14 pixels and a width of 14 pixels as well. And let's also get rid of the default padding for this. So we can see that now it's a neat little square. So the second one is the WebKit swatch itself. So if you notice carefully, you can see that there's a border around this, but let's actually match this border to the border that we provided for the color picker as well as the border radius. So for that, let's copy the border from here as well as the border radius from here. And that is already starting to look a little bit neater. Let's add some spacing between this swatch and the hex value. For that, let's just add a margin right to the input type color and provide it a value of maybe 8 pixels. And there we go. So now we have an indicator who matches the hex value. So I can update this to a blue now, or a green, I think, and that works. So that handles our second point here, which is to show an indicator for the currently entered hex value. So now, like I said, element itself handles the dropdown, but selecting a value here doesn't change the hex value or doesn't pass on the value to the app. So for that, let's just wire in the on change from the prop that was provided to the color picker to the input type color as well. And let's also just spread these props as well, just in case. And now let's see this in action. So I can come in here and type a hex value, and that's changing the indicator. I can click on this to open up the color picker, and then I can select a value from here, which is updating the hex value as well. So if you found this video useful, please leave a like, maybe even subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.